So we have 27 books in the New Testament, right? And 13 of those books are attributed to Paul, letters that Paul wrote to congregations. But I think sometimes we just don't know what to make of Paul or what to do with Paul. And we also have a tendency sometimes to have this sense that Paul just had things all worked out, that he had his sort of what he thought about God and what he thought about Jesus just all put together. And so then he writes these sort of treatises or these sort of well-crafted things to these congregations as if he has all the answers. But then what we do, I think, is forget that these were real congregations. These were struggling congregations, some congregations that had been established for a little while, but then there are some that are brand new and they're experiencing real issues. And all across the map in terms of what these congregations are experiencing, what they're going through as they figure out what it means to be a Christian. And so Paul writes these letters with those issues in mind. So they're very particular, they're situational, they're occasional. I sometimes like to think of that Paul writes these as a word on target. He's not writing this sort of general idea of who Jesus is, but he's trying to communicate to a particular community who Jesus needs to be for them. So, for example, you get the Thessalonians, right? And most scholars think that First Thessalonians is the oldest actually writing in the New Testament, that it's Paul's first letter that we have, even though it's later on in the New Testament. Romans is first in the New Testament. But so you have First Thessalonians, and what are they experiencing there? Well, the expectation was that Jesus would come back at any moment, that the second coming would have any moment. And what's happening to this congregation? The members are dying. And so they communicate to Paul, their pastor, Paul, what do we do? What do we think? What do we believe? Our people are dying. What's going to happen to them? And so Paul communicates this beautiful image of the loved ones meeting Jesus in the clouds, right? So he is writing to them in a sense of knowing what they need to hear. Or then you go to Galatians, and that's a totally different situation, right? There's a general form for a letter in those days. You had a nice greeting, and then you had a thanksgiving, and then you went into the body of the letter. And all of Paul's letters have the greeting and thanksgiving except for Galatians. So he writes his greeting, and then what happens? I am astonished that you have so quickly deserted the gospel. Why? Because there's something at stake for Paul, something really serious at stake about what Jesus means and who Jesus is. And so he lets the Thanksgiving go entirely and says, okay, Galatians, listen up. This is serious business. So when we're reading the letters of Paul, I think it's helpful to remember that this is Paul the pastor. This is Paul writing to real congregations with real situations and real concerns. And then how that makes us hear Paul maybe in a different way.